for tuning into the show. Another episode of the Only Mystics Journey podcast with your host, Dan Jenkins, aka Old Man Junkins, and of course, Gladiator style, Danicus. This conversation was a lot more heartfelt and sort of getting into more personal areas of Dr. Richard Allen Miller and his upbringing, his mom, his stepdad, him moving through school, what that experience was like. And I had a really good time. There is some repeats of stuff from the last episode, which I think is just going to be par for the course as we move forward and hopefully do another episode with him. But I have to say, I'm just incredibly honored to be able to speak to Dr. Richard Allen Miller, Rick Miller, because if half of what he says is true, which I believe honestly all of it is, this guy has left a serious mark on humanity and has gifted so much knowledge and wisdom to our species. He's a very special person, and I'm glad to just show hopefully another side of who he is and inspire people to connect with his work and just get to know the man a little bit behind all the stories and all the information, all the science and the math and that kind of thing. So I hope you enjoy. We talked about the CIA. We talked about his journey to the Antarctic base, Nazi base, or the deep tunnels, the caverns, with the bioluminescent mold. And I hope you enjoy. I hope you, for all those Doc Ram fans out there, I think this is one that will allow you to get more closer to the man. So without further ado, have a great time watching the episode. Cheers. This computer. Hello, everybody out there. Thanks for tuning in again to another episode of the Only Mystics Journey with Danicus, aka Old Man Junkins, aka Dan Jenkins. It's good to have you with me. And once again, we have returning guest Richard Allen Miller, Dr. Richard Allen Miller, with us here today. How are you doing, Rick?
I used to say I'm going bald from unnatural causes, but now I'm shaving it.
Well, it looks great, man. So today we're having you back. Last time we talked a little bit about your history. We checked out your books. We checked out lots of different aspects of your book collection, and today we're happy to have you back, and we're going to talk about more about your life, your history. I wanted to go into mind control today, especially how it relates to our gut and how our second brain is a big proponent of how we think and all that sort of stuff. So to start off today, I wanted to start off by saying that, number one, you have a partner, an ex-wife that used to be in the CIA. And I found that very interesting because I didn't know that. And I just wanted to ask you a little bit about what it's like to be with a CIA agent and the psychology there. And yeah, how you doing?
She was a narcissist, and I found papers that I'd written before I even met her where she had taken my name off it, put her name on it, and published it.
Wow.
That's a real narcissist. She was a classic narcissist. She was, when I say CIA, she was under counterintelligence. Like I was under intel, she was counterintel. That means taking and changing things, the spin on something to redirect or misdirect. And the CIA is not a bad organization, but within it had a series of cells or groups of individuals that had no accountability. And that's where the real crime comes in. And it isn't that it's the CIA or not, because I have friends in the CIA, just like I have friends in Navy intelligence. It's just their intent. It's not who you are, but what you do that defines who you are. Remember that quote? That's absolutely true. That's a truism. It's what you do, your intent. Your purpose is why you're here, and your intent is how you do it.
Right. So with this partner, are you saying that she was kind of like undercover the whole time, and because you're a person of interest?
I didn't know that. And she's kept me around even after I was divorced from her and things of that nature. I didn't marry, so she could get Social Security. and she she had a number of other people that she did like me, and you'll find about them like uh, I won't mention any names, but they'll come
Mm-hmm.
up. She's dead now. She died a couple of years back, and ever since then, I still sense there's something around me keeping me on a short leash, and
Hmm.
I don't know what that is. Whether it's a human or an AI, I probably on somebody's list. Everybody's starting to feel these kinds of things, because of the quickening, if you will call it that.
Yeah.
There's
Yeah.
like,
So within that, I think because I think a lot of people at this point in the public are starting to come to some understanding of what the CIA is and how it's portrayed in Hollywood, and then the aspects of the secret societies, Project Paperclip, some like you said, inner cells, inner mystery
well, it's
schools
like
within it.
information that I know something and how to do something you don't. Ha ha ha.
Yeah, yeah,
Why? For me, uh, there are no discoveries. It's historically the people that make the discoveries usually it's the same time, and someone gets credit for it, but it's discovered by a number of different kinds of people at the same time, from different perspectives, etc. Mind control. I gave you a historical thing on the mind control, and you can see it started way back when. You know,
mm-hmm,
and
mm-hmm,
if they can, what I did that was interesting is after I had my close encounter with Krill, I
mm-hmm.
couldn't figure out how she could speak inside my head, and that's when Alan Frey and I then came up with the idea of synthetic telepathy, where what you do is you use zero point 0.3 to 3 gigahertz microwave band, and you heterodyne audio on it, and you hear voices in your head. Now, the bad news is if you turn the volume of the voice down, it's then sometimes difficult to know whether or not it's your own thought.
Wow.
Rather,
So yeah, it could just be floating around and influencing
and
you
you're
and
thinking it's your own thought, and you're thinking, well, maybe I should consider that. See what I'm saying? And then,
absolutely.
well, that's synthetic telepathy. What I did it for was trying to figure out how Crow talked to me. That is not how she did it. I don't know that we'll know for a while because she's, in my humble opinion, was probably, metaphorically speaking, me programming me for the future.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, because at that point you're trying to understand
Because I didn't
why.
work, yeah, I didn't work alien studies. I did paranormal studies under Schleicher. I
Right.
wasn't the secret space program with
Right. So within that, because we talked about Krill last episode, for those of you, if you're not aware of that, go back to episode one. But Krill was an entity that you came to, and you said Groom Lake. And I wanted to clarify because I believe that's another name for Area 51, right?
yes, it is. Uh-huh.
Right. So that's
Basically, Roswell had two dead aliens and a dying alien. And when the dying alien died, they did an autopsy on the body, which is famously on record, and then a fourth alien appeared wanting the body because
mhm,
they could resurrect the body,
right.
apparently.
So
And
Roswell.
what I'm now believing is that bodies are golems. Dr. Charlotte Bach wrote a very important paper. It's at the Warburg called Homo Mutant, Homo Lumen. And what I did is a screenplay around that about the last days of man when the Van Allen belt collapses and an alien form of human appears as a light body that needs a golem. And I sense that aliens, whether they're a tall gray, a small gray, which were Roswell. Roswell was the small grays or spacecraft, but a tall gray is different and
Mhm,
yet the same. And Nordics and reptilian, all these different forms that we have are all oriented around a face, two arms, and two legs, which is basically a carbon-based life form with DNA. And that's the studies I'm doing now with a couple of Russians on alien DNA studies on academia. And the thing that I've discovered is that silicone-based life forms, AIs, for example, may look human, may give better head as a metaphor. Well, and yet they don't have DNA because they're silicone-based life forms. And that's what led me to start to conclude possibly that all these different aliens that have morphed out of little green men from Mars, um, basically are carbon-based life forms.
Hmm.
And
Okay,
that
so
would indicate our future, maybe, where
right,
time
yeah,
is really real. It's a construct.
absolutely. And so within that, Roswell was in the late 40s where that initial incident happened, right? Like when the
What?
initial crash
Roswell?
was in
Yeah.
Roswell. Yeah.
Roswell happened in the 60s, I think. No, not 60s. Late, I don't remember exactly. I think Mount Rainier and some of those spacecraft pictures that they had was before Roswell. So I think, yeah, Roswell was somewhere in the 60s. And that's when Groom Lake was established. I think it was in 62 or 63, somewhere in there.
Yeah, so because it says the original incident started in 1947, but that was
Okay,
just the
47.
original
That's
incident,
probably
and
right.
that's
That's
right after World War II, and then that was when the starting of all these alien sightings started, and
and
eventually, right?
visioning,
So
spacecraft, and so on. Yeah, different.
right, so very interesting. Within that, so we talked about synthetic telepathy and krill. So I also wanted to go into just to go where we're gonna go today. We had briefly discussed that you had visited a base in Antarctica that was a deemed Nazi base. You went there through Thule Island, and then you went into a submarine, and you were doing something with the weather or the light, right?
Yes, that's correct. That was in 1974. I was hired as the physicist in charge of light. I was the guy trying to figure out how the light worked in this cavern. And
Hmm.
it was a form of bioluminescence. I sent you a paper on that. I believe you have a copy of that paper. That's a
Hmm.
really old paper. You'll notice it's MRU. And when we came up in this, the cavern was over a mile high. I mean,
Right.
I'm talking about like a mile. And it had uh, light, and nobody figured that out. It was bioluminescence. There was a molding kind of things that grow on the side of the wall, and they were bioluminescing. That gave off the light. There was weather in there, and when we first came in, we saw the Nazi base. There were 19 slips there, and it looked like it had been nuked by by someone like maybe Kennedy did that. I don't know. We were never given that kind of information. Further down, uh, there was a Viking base from the 14th century, and then further was this huge hole that went straight down into the mantle, 100 miles into the earth. That we didn't have the technology. We had drones then, but we didn't have drones that could go up and down 100 miles. We have rocket ships that could go up, but going down, we didn't have anything like that. And basically, at that time, our technology said that that would be plastique. It was so hot down there that everything was turned into plastic or plastique. It became, semi
Hmm.
mold. And yet later, a few years back, when Armstrong, who was it? Armstrong that went down with a group of
To
others. Yeah, and
to Antarctica, yeah, yeah.
yeah, they had the technology, and he called and told me that when they went down there, something woke up. And he didn't tell me what it was, but I'm guessing it was probably something like Nephilim or something equivalent that came from Mars, keeping an eye on what humans are becoming and so on. I don't know how that all works, other than um, they quarantined the island. You remember Antarctica got quarantined. They weren't allowing anybody to go over there at one point.
Yeah.
And I have no idea what that all was about. But that was my experience, and my contribution was that bioluminescence paper.
Right. So when you get called for one of these missions, does that really like take you back and like to set when you're like, oh, we have to go to Antarctica, I'm going to this base, like being in the submarine, like what does that feel like leading up to actually getting there?
Hey, it's I've had a lot of first first time experiences and a lot of area. No, I historically I feel blessed in one sense that I've been allowed to experience so much more than most human beings. And what it all comes down to is like Robert Palmer when he sang, "I'm addicted to love. I wonder where all the money went." Well, you'll notice when he was singing that and he's singing his song and he's doing his thing, he's got three robots behind him. They're models, but they're like robots. They're specialists. They're playing their guitars, but they're not really. It was really kind of weird to experience these things and to realize that I now know what I don't want to do. You know that. um,
which
I
is
don't know
which
how to,
is
what's that?
what don't you want to do these days?
Well, like certain kinds of women, and why
Yeah.
my goal was never for money. Really, I could make a lot of money if I stayed with herbs. I did $10,000 a day in labor, paying labor every day, 10 grand, just to do 150 truckloads of pine cones out of Lapine and Sisters for kindling for the East Coast. What color would you like a fire starter, Mom? But I have these manuscripts of experiences that I did that I want to complete before I turn into a worm casing. And I'm not being allowed to do that. Even at my age, I stopped making money so I could write, and it's not working for me. I, I I'm being distracted every moment. I used to do three to seven radio every week. Now I'm doing maybe one or two a month. And, why? Am I old and I just don't have anything fresh, or what's the problem? See, I don't know. And why have my book sales? I remember going to the post office with boxes of books, big tote bags with books. And now I'm lucky to take one or two a day.
Well,
And
and we hope to change that. We hope to change that and get another momentum shift and everything like that. But as I kind of steer back to that earlier question of just trying to understand, like, being with someone in the CIA, like being in these different
I loved her.
encounters, like,
I was in love
right.
with her. How could you not love her? I mean, she was a diva. In fact, unfortunately, I'm probably still in love with
Wow. Yeah,
her.
and
I
this
mean,
is your life though, right? For a lot of people,
yeah,
it's
but
it's so
you know,
interesting and fascinating, but you
just
live
because
this.
they're self-destructive does not mean you don't love them. I cared for
Yeah,
her. I really did, and I
absolutely.
she stimulated me in writing, and got really interested in what I was doing. And the next thing I know, she's taking my material and making it hers. And
Wow.
well, that's okay in some sense of it. We all plagiarize or whatever, but uh, I don't know how to explain it.
Yeah. Well, and so again, because I've followed and a lot of this stuff has been you've mentioned this and there's a lot of your life and your material that's out on the internet. And what I really want to get into is some of like the feelings and the smells and the sights, then bringing it in, right? Because like for
Well,
example, when you
my
say,
first submarine was when I
yeah,
won. I went to nationals and I went to nationals with my linear accelerator, and Robert Strom out of New York beat me with his computer UNIVAC, and but I won the Navy Cruiser Award and got to go from San Diego to Hawaii in a Nautilus and a submarine, and that was my first submarine experiment, and that was
wow.
in 1962. So, and then of course we went in '74. We went in a different kind of a submarine. They're compact. They're kind of scary, and you realize just how dangerous things are because when I did a NAUI rating in what year was that? 68, 1968. I did my first dive, and I broke a world record. It was 4 hours at 100 feet. Come on down to KTAC and get your new. I was broadcasting for KTAC on American Lake, next to Fort Lewis, and that was in 60. That was in 1968. I broke one eardrum at that level. It took me 3 days to decompress. And
Mm-hmm.
then another time I went into Russia to do a naughty, and instead of flying under the radar, they put me in an EVA suit, and I went down like a missile. And I was really scared because I thought I was going to die. But I dove into Russia, did my thing, and then they missed the pickup in the Bering Sea, and I was at sea for almost 3 days. I
So
mean,
so what's that? So you say you went to Russia and
yeah.
you had to do a dive
Well, I
and
was behind the radar because I had to go in and do something naughty. And
oh, how naughty are we
yeah.
talking?
Well, they at that time that was when Khrushchev and all that was it Khrushchev? No, I think it was Khrushchev was in '62. I forget it. I think it was Brezhnev. I don't remember, but they were doing something they wanted me to fix in computers, and I did that. And I
Okay.
did as a that was the only probably real serious black ops thing I ever did. And when I went out into the Bering Sea, they missed the pickup, and I had to be at sea for 3 days. And that was another world record. I kept I kept breaking these different kinds of records, because I had to do it. And what
Hmm.
IQ is adaptability. EQ is what real intelligence is, in my humble opinion. And IQ, that's how Krill communicated, was with emotions. And like 20 minutes of emotional communication, it's like a lifetime of words. We don't have
Absolutely.
anything like that, in our.
Well, I wonder if these abilities of kind of like extraterrestrial, if they do have some relationship with our past or future or some sort of evolution that perhaps there's something that we can tap into to have that type of kind of
There
psychic
is
like
that
telepathy, right?
you can the altered states of consciousness in Power Tools, my book Power Tools,
Hmm.
talked about John Curtis Gowan and his ontology of mystical state. Yeah, that book. Those are essentially the 8 protocols I gave Navy SEALs. When I wrote that, Nick Begich had brought me up to Alaska to write a book called The Brain Spa. I had already done ESP,
Hmm.
but ESP book, but I hadn't done Power Tools yet. And he he brought me up to do the Brain Spa, which would be a functional MRI and a kind of cloned or franchise system where you could go in for alternative medicine and herbal pharmacy. And it turned out he didn't have the technology to do that. So he encouraged me to write on Power Tools, which were the 8 protocols I gave the SEAL program that turned them into Supermen, which would be a foundation for the Brain Spa. Using
Right, right. Which, so this again, for those listeners out there, definitely want you guys to head over to richandellermiller.com and pick up Power Tools, pick up the 3 box set with the workbook 1 and 2 and
well, there's
beyond.
a 5 book. It's a 5 book set now for Europe or Canada.
Right, right. So
Yeah,
5 book sets. So another thing too, because again,
three
I
books
think
of
we
five predicated on that.
can't understate the importance of the power tools being one of your main like prodigious works. But
Yeah,
I wanted to go back a little bit into your growing up. So you just mentioned your first submarine ride. That was around the time you were in high school and you had made it into through your junior and senior high school science fair projects
yeah.
in
And
1901 and
actually, I was also part
1962.
of Jesse. There was a Junior Science Summer Institute at Washington State University. That's why I ended up moving from the UW to Pullman to finish my undergraduate degree, which, by
Wow.
the way, was the plasma jet, the first plasma jet ever built, and that had created a flame about this long. And I put magnetic fields around it and started tying it in knots and things like that. My
So,
professor, uh, Bender, I think it was Dr. Bender, after I had done Carillion photography uh, in 1970, when I went to New York and presented that paper. That's where I met Ed Mitchell. Bender then at Pullman built the first MRI based on my work on that Carillion photography, which was
whoa.
not measuring aura, what it is, it's a secondary emission of electrons. But it led him to realize that with using secondary emission, you can create an MRI, and that's where it led to that
That's
development.
interesting because I've seen MRIs when they take the case off. What's actually spinning is this like giant metal circle that spins so fast that you wouldn't expect someone getting scanned by that in the doctor's office is has this metal just hurtling around them at
Yeah.
insane speeds. Like it's yeah, it's pretty
It's
crazy. That's
not
why it's so
crowing
loud.
photography, but that was what led Bender to work in that direction. When I disproved that crowing photography, I proved categorically that it was a secondary emission of electrons. And you can find that under the galaxies of infra. I presented that paper at Prague, in Prague.
So I think too, part of your story that's so interesting is how you were able to create such a intensive admissions to science in the field of science and physics with your two projects in high school because your stepfather was a retired Navy vet, right? And then your
Yeah,
mother was
radio.
a famous psychic, according to
My
your
mother.
Amazon.
Yeah, my
So
mother.
can you tell me a little bit about your mom and what her abilities were or what that was like?
She was measured by Duke University back in the 30s, and went to the University of Washington. And when she was 16, she was brilliant, and uh, was able to do card readings and other kinds of things like a psychic does. Different than what you call mediumship and so on. Mom was a psychic. She and what she did later in life was she formed what was called the Fourth and Pike Building in Seattle, and had Vesta Cutting and Associates, which was an industrial espionage system. She placed private secretaries for Boeing, Douglas United Nuclear, all the top end. Mom would test them for typing and things like that, and they would go to work for Boeing or so on, but they didn't work for Boeing. They worked for my mother.
Oh,
That,
wow.
yeah. And but she was one of the top psychics in the world. And my grandmother, her mother, was who the Birdman of Alcatraz used to get out of prison when my grandmother was raised German roller canary birds and songbirds, and was world champion for songbirds. And when the Birdman did his thing on how to survive these birds and things, my grandmother was really into helping him get out of prison. So just history, not.
Oh, I'm gonna have to look this up and do separate episodes being like, this is what Rick was talking about and so on.
Well, nobody's
So
ever talked to me about that. My dad was my stepdad. Basically, when I was almost 4 years old, my I heard my mother screaming, and I went in. It was my father beating up my mother, and he grabbed me and threw me against the wall and broke my neck. And
whoa.
shortly after, my mother introduced me to my new father. I remember he flew out of Anahuac. He was a pilot, co-pilot in Hellcats and so on, where he was radioman. He was the radioman and gunner. That's what my dad did when he was in the Navy. And then when he retired, we went back east to Washington, D.C., and he went to Korea and got technical background, and then went to work for Boeing. And I
And
remember, yeah, he helping me.
he taught you so much as a kid, right? Just throughout your
Yeah, like
life about
at 10 years
technology
old,
and
we built our own home from scratch. I learned how to throw slate and lay brick and set up a watering system, for disposal.
wow. So because at that point, by the time you get to high school, your stepdad and your mother was also brilliant, has just taught you. Were you like homeschooled? Did you go
No,
to
I
regular?
went to normal school. They found me, I was gifted. And third grade report card said, Ricky's very disruptive. He asks too many questions. By the time I was in fourth grade, uh, they wanted to give me Ritalin.
Mm, even back then, hey?
And mom wouldn't let them do that. And fourth grade, they found I couldn't read English. I hadn't even I spoke Palau and Tagalog and Mandarin 1, but I didn't even read English until fourth grade, and I was kept after school like a punishment to learn how to read. In fifth grade, I read everything in the local library that had a little atom on it. I got interested. I just started reading science fiction. And by sixth grade, they wanted to give me Ritalin. Mom wouldn't let them. And then, and I think it was sixth. Yeah, it was sixth grade. They then wanted to advance me into high school, and mom wouldn't let them do that either, which kept me basically semi-normal, even though I'm circular. I'm all over the place, rather than linear.
Yeah.
But I didn't get advanced. And then when I went to when I was in high school, they had this thing called the Junior Science Summer Institute at Washington State University, and they had me go there. And that's where I met my first real wife, Patty. She was at Pullman when I was at the UW, and I got mononucleosis and nearly died and had to go to classes. I was working out at the Swept Wing Inn on the midnight to four as a three-quarter hat chef, and then I'd have to get up at 8 o'clock in the morning to be in classes. And I transferred to Pullman, and Professor Riggins then made me a graduate level TA. I was a teaching assistant, research teaching assistant. And that's how I worked my way through college. And we were married. And then when old man DuPont took me back east to go to Delaware to do my graduate work, that's when I had my daughter Paula, and Pat dropped out of college and put me through college while I did my graduate level. And then I came back and went to work for Boeing. Boeing at that time lost the B-1 contract, and 30,000 PhDs hit the streets in one day. And they dropped me from a GS-12 back to a GS-10, but I had laboratories I was doing at Boeing. And what I did is I quit and went to work for anesthesiology, and that's where Jerry Pollack picked me up. And in 1 year in anesthesiology, I got tenure. They were behind in a 5-year grant. They were behind in 2 years on making the first aortic catheter, and I built the whole thing from scratch in 1 year. And it, which is now the most important measurement in medicine. Goes in through the femoral artery and up into the aortic arch. And what it does is it measures cardiac output, which is a Doppler. I had a 10 megahertz Doppler transducer. It gave me blood flow. And then I had 28 megahertz crystals around the 2 millimeter diameter. I was under a microscope soldering it. It did pulse echo, where it would hit the aortic wall. And the cross-sectional times the blood flow is the single most important measurement in medicine. When surgery takes you down to does terrible things to your brain or whatever they're doing, brain surgery or whatever, the anesthesiologist is holding you down below a level of going into shock, and holds you right there at that level while they do these things so that you can come back out normal. And that's what I did in 1 year. And then when I left there, they kept me there, so I had access to the laboratories, and that's when I did SEAL Corp and then later MRU under Schleicher, the paranormal studies.
Wow. Okay, that was great. That was very straight, like a straight line of some
that's how I
history
did
there.
it. And then from there, it goes on. I mean, old man.
Well, let's pause for a second. How did you meet Old Man DuPont, and what's his full name? Or
I don't know. He was the first DuPont that I met. In '64, I did code. I think I was a junior in high school or something. Yeah, I was almost 16. I was not quite 16. And I did code, which was NOR NAND, or what you call object oriented. NOR NAND logic starts after you go to integral variables, calculus, integral variables. Next is logic. And I was into logic at that time. And I was doing and or not rather than either or. It's either this, that was binary. That was Michael James Reconasuccio and Captain Crunch. And then I did the NOR NAND part, which was object oriented. I could take uh, uh, 15 megabytes and collapse it into half a meg.
Wow. So when
Yeah,
you were
using
growing
object
up,
oriented.
like you said, you were sort of seen as like this problem child by your teachers or whatever because you obviously weren't being fully challenged like mentally. When you
Well, I felt I was. I
You
mean,
thought you were? So,
yeah.
but by the time you started getting into your teen, like into high school and junior high school, like that's when everything started to take off, right? And you really started to get a lot more
Well, grade
into,
school too. They knew there was something. They knew I was different. Even in grade school, I came in
okay,
fifth grade, and by fifth grade, they knew there was something else going on there, because I read everything, a book a day at 14, 12, 13. I was just
right.
I couldn't get it up,
So,
and
so
yeah.
Well, I was gonna ask you, so you worked for Boeing. So these are these kind of institutions that for me, like someone that hasn't been in any of that type of stuff, I've heard spooky stuff about Boeing and aerospace and just in general, potentially they have a lot back there of more advanced crafts and stuff that they don't share with the public. You know, What's your take on Boeing? Like, is there inner institutions inside of Boeing as well that is potentially, holding
I
back
had
like
top
advanced
secret
technology?
clearance. Yeah, I had top secret clearance at Boeing. Well, that means I was a reader, like 3 days of the Condor. I had vault permits. That means I ran certain vaults. Um, they had the acres of desks. I've got one right here that's an old Boeing surplus desk. It's really nice. It's made with metal and, blah, blah, blah. But I had three laboratories, not just one, as well. The fact
Whoa.
I did all the strain gauge measurements. You know what a strain gauge is? Where you put this gauge on a wing, and then you try to force the wing to find out where it'll break. And you're trying to determine what the stress is on the wing. I did that was a 747 static test, and I built all the strain gauges for those.
That's fascinating.
Yeah, that's what I did at Boeing, and that's why they didn't let me go. Even though they let 30,000 PhDs go in one day when they lost the B-1. I was, the
Ha-
B-1 was pretty interesting aircraft actually. It was,
Yeah,
you know,
so in those vaults, like, did you ever just go and walk around and look at all this
that's what they
stuff and
did.
just
That's what I
see?
did because I managed the vault. I was a reader, which means I could be in that vault without a need to know. You had to have a need to know in order to go into a vault. And but I was the one that managed it. And there was this one two-star general that I put in prison because he was in one of my vaults without a need to know, and I wasn't safe until he was dead. After he got out of prison, I mean, I'm not kidding.
Yeah.
And what I was basically when the Russia would do a research thing on something, and then all of a sudden there's no more papers on it. Why is that? Well, that's because that's what I did. I could take two unrelated things and figure out how they connected together. And that was why I would manage that kind of vault with those kinds of information in it.
Hmm.
I was really good at that.
So, so the far, like I've heard, for example, with like JFK being assassinated and stuff, and everyone that gets into all the different areas of like why that happened. I've heard through a dark journalist. Don't know if you're familiar with him, but he has gone into a lot about being an aerospace connection, a Boeing connection. Kennedy wanted to share the space program, like the Roswell stuff, with the Russians, and that was the true reason why he got
Yeah,
assassinated.
the Russia was very superstitious back in the 60s. When I say that, their technology is not like it was now. And in my humble opinion, Putin, while he might have been KGB and riding bulls bare chested, has done more for Mother Russia than anyone in their history. And he's a nationalist. He's not trying to expand. And the reason they had a problem with Ukraine was that's where its food came from, just like ours comes from Kansas. Now, what would you do if all of a sudden Kansas decided it wanted to take control of the universe?
Yeah,
Because
well, exactly.
yeah,
And even with like, we've talked about Edgar Casey and he has some prophecies about Russia and different aspects of how they would potentially be one of the next sort of leaders of the epoch. So it's interesting stuff, right?
And
But yeah,
China,
so
and China right now, China has got these cities that are completely abandoned. People don't realize China's in a world of hurt, and that's why they're doing what they do, because there's no other option. They're
hmm,
going to fall apart. That whole society is going to fall apart shortly. I mean, and that's will cause more war because and when Peking started to uh, uh, have a hassle with what is that island, Formosa. I mean, Formosa was not mostly China; it was mostly Europe.
whoa, yeah,
Yeah,
I'm not familiar with that. I'll have to look into
yeah, the
that.
big war of Japan, and Japan took over China at one point.
Wow,
Yeah,
wow. So
yeah,
yeah,
they
so many
invaded China
interesting
and they
things.
had control of it for a while. That's where it led to Formosa and all the Chinese separation between all of that. There's things
Hmm,
that are. I'm not politically astute. I'm a nerd and know my limitations because the
hmm.
rules of engagement are completely different. And try to be I try to attend the nerd form of approaching something, even though I'm more open than that. I try to be a nerd when I'm communicating because then you have credibility with you in terms of you're getting nerd information, not political or you know what I'm trying. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
absolutely. Well, I just want the information to come out, and I want people to understand because I that makes sense. If you interact with that and bring more of that kind of like n quote unquote nerd information to help to not to just put in the bias here and there, and I'm looking to kind of humanize a bit more and understand like wh who is the person behind this mind and this work and all these things, so
well.
people
That's
can
why my
relate and
wife.
open up.
That's why she called me the Wizard of Oz. She said I married the Wizard of Oz. That's a paper she wrote where she actually shows pictures of me doing things as a credibility. Now, why did she do that? For keywords for herself.
Oh yeah, so Richard sent me that. Rick sent me that. He sent me a paper that his ex-wife wrote that was in the CIA called "I Married the Wizard of Oz," and I was going through that. I might go through some of that when I edit the show and show some pictures of that. But yeah, so let's keep moving through. So we're gonna get into mind control as kind of the last half of the episode. But before we do that,
You can do it another time.
when you worked at NASA, what what was that like? What's the where was this? What kind of
Which
buildings? What kind of
which time?
people?
I've worked for NASA several times on different projects. Which one?
So is this like a contracting thing, or were you actually going
Yeah,
and working
I'm
and
an outside consultant that they would bring in and give me limited information, and I would do my study and try to do it. Now, when I went to Mars with 12 NASA scientists, I was not working for NASA.
no. Okay, so let's go into that next because we mentioned that last time we showed the image. But as far as
What do you think
the
of that,
first
eh?
time,
And
pardon me?
now they're finding it on the planet Saturn, which means our solar system is a life form. And if you don't think NASA doesn't want to know where that wormhole goes, I mean, we're talking about serious situation here with a new concept of what space is.
Yeah, absolutely. So before we go there, the
Okay.
first time that you get the phone call and it's NASA and they're calling and they want you to work for them, what is that like? What goes through your head?
Um, Wondering why. Like maybe they want better control of me if I'm there rather than where I am here. Because a GS 12, 18, I mean, doesn't report to anybody. I choose what I want to do. And when I was working for Schleicher, there were things I wouldn't do. I just
Wow.
won't do it. I work for myself. I don't work for them. That was one of the problems I had with them is that I was very independent because I knew who I was, knew what I didn't want to be, and still made mistakes. You know,
So
now I
what
know I
year?
don't want to do.
Yeah, what year did they first call you?
Well, I went back in 1960 with Old Man DuPont.
Okay, that was the first
That was
time,
the
right?
first. Yeah, that was when I did code, and
Right.
they.
And then that was with your space missions that got you or because I wanted to mention this too, and I know it's been on things, but your projects were used on the Mariner 1 mission in 1964 to discover water on Venus?
No, it wasn't Mariner 1. The Mariner 4 was right after they used my science fair project on the Mariner 4 to
Okay.
measure the water on Mars.
Right. So what
That's,
was the what
yeah,
was the
that was
second time?
Mariner 4 was in 1960, I think it was 63, something Mariner 4, when they did flyby Mars. What they did is they used my concept of bending light and okay, that's to measure the water on Mars.
So what was
I
that?
get
Maybe go into that a little bit more?
well, I wasn't even told. I didn't even know that until they did it.
Oh.
And what I'm trying to say, it's like,
Yeah.
what? You know,
Yeah.
there's my science fair project. 2 years out, well, it was 2 years after I did it in '62. Yeah, in '64, 1964, they did the flyby on Mars, and that's when NASA used May. But I didn't know that on Mariner 4. I didn't know that they were using that. They were using May without me knowing it, kind of thing. Because I'm
So
naive. I am.
that's the freaky part about what I feel like about like, counterintelligence agents, like the
Yeah, they use
aerospace,
people
these
that aren't sincere. Yeah,
military
we're trying
structures.
to do the
Yeah.
right thing. We make mistakes. I now know what I don't want to do, that kind of
Yeah.
thing. And I try to recover from what I've done, to a woman or something like that, where I was not in love with her, but I was in lust, different,
Mm-hmm.
and you wake up and you realize what the distinctional difference is as a human being. And I realized that while I'm really smart, I'm not that much smarter than anybody else. I made a lot of mistakes. And what I'm trying not to do is make the same one twice.
Mm-hmm.
Use it as,
So
a feedback.
So going through the systems of these industrial complexes, right? These military aspects and everything, you found that there's a lot of confusing elements of how you get
Oh yeah,
recruited and who you're.
they'll mess with you. For example, when I went back one time when I went back east to Arlington, they sent a prostitute in to spend time with me. I didn't know that.
Oh, yeah, that kind of stuff, right? The
Yeah,
honeypot type
yeah,
of thing.
yeah. You're a young kid. You're away from home, and you know,
Yeah, it's
yeah,
like
and
spy
and
stuff
you
basically.
go home, and then you realize what they're doing is using you against yourself to get what they want.
Hmm.
And then you can't really blame them because you're the one that did it, not them. I did
Hmm.
but now I won't do that again. I've become
Hmm.
that Ducky Mallard, an ethical man knows not to cheat on his wife, a moral man won't. In other words, I'm now starting to discover who I am, and I try to walk my talk as a way of being consistent for other people to discover what their walk wants to be like. Doesn't have to be like mine. We're all unique.
Well, I really feel that. I really feel that because I felt drawn to your words. And again, you have claims that are mind-bending as far as your life and what you've able to do. And there's something that just my intuition speaks to me and says, this guy has all the hallmarks of being the real deal, the pretty stuff and the
Well,
not pretty
yeah, you
stuff.
don't know because there's this edge on it, and how much of it is me and how much of it is a group of me.
Ah, yeah, getting
Okay,
into kind of the
yeah, there's
holographic.
other people like me, I'm certain. I don't think
Mm,
I'm that big a deal. I mean, I'm bright, but that doesn't mean I know what I'm doing, you
right,
know?
right. Well,
Well,
and
I
that's
know that.
I mean, any good thriller movie within the aspects of spycraft and all that stuff is realizing that there was this whole construct that wasn't real, and it was to create these situations to get what they want out of you, right? So, okay, so the next place I want to go with is let's go into like the mind control topic, right? So there's lots of different mind control aspects. I would say that I'd argue that there are some forces that are in government, that are in these different intelligence agencies, that are, some global powers that almost seem like non-human or something that are affecting our humanness and reprogramming us to basically keep us divided and conquered, right? And to go on further than that. So one of the things that you had sent me was regarding Monsanto. And because I'm a mycologist and I understand the gut and the importance of that and talking about nutraceutical mushrooms, there's an aspect of Monsanto and the chemicals that are being used to affect our food supply, mainly in the US and throughout the world, I guess. So
That's the
what's your
original
take on
place
that?
where mind control occurred, I think, is in our food. That's when they started to try to control us. And I have a nice PowerPoint on that. If you ever want to make a nice story on that, where I
Hmm.
show that, but sugar, and there are different kinds of sugars. You got beta glucans, you got polysaccharides. They're all different kinds of sugars, and they all do different kinds of things. But the one that has a lot of oxygen in it, your body can't get enough oxygen. And what you're in your cell, you have a quark gluon plasma engine called ATP, adenosine triphosphate, ATP. And when you take certain kinds of mushrooms, when the polysaccharide breaks down 100 oxygen molecules, it turns on your cell wall and your immune system is, and then it's remarkable what happens. You can't get enough oxygen into your body. And what I tried to do is a new concept in delivery system where I had even more access to the oxygen than through the gut. Because the
Hmm.
gut, you take a pill, goes through digestion. Let's say you have an abscess tooth, and and you have to take an antibiotic.
Well, and so Rick, we actually went through this on the last episode, right? Because
Okay,
you mentioned the jet milling and getting into your system and that abscess
right.
tooth and beyond. So,
Yes.
what can you talk to me a little bit about Roundup, the fertilizer
Roundup
that used
itself
by
is a
Monsanto?
translocator. Yeah, Roundup in itself is not bad. It breaks down to inorganic salts within 10 days of application. You don't want to use it very often because for 10 days, the soil has got these weird chemistries in it that will eventually break down into nothing and it'll be fine. However, if you put it in the gene, like corn, so that you don't ever have to till your field and you don't ever have to worry about weeds, just it'll grow corn. That's different because the Roundup is there all the time. Doesn't
Wow.
break. You understand the difference? That's
Yeah.
GMO. Now, GMOs themselves are not bad. It's the use of the GMO and how it's applied. If you take Roundup and you put it in the gene, so it's part of the plant, that's a different matter altogether. And now you've got a problem in that you can't grow anything in that field ever again until except corn. That's what
So
Roundup is: a good thing, a neutral thing, and a bad thing.
right.
And
So within that, if you use enough Roundup, would it just start to be infused into the seed and it would be a natural kind of GMO that
no,
starts
they
to
put
unfold,
it
or
in
is it
the
like a
gene. They put it in the gene. It's part of the plant as part of they've modified the corn to the point where it has Roundup as a natural part of its chemistry. And
okay?
that's
So
called a GMO.
right. So and glyphosate, that's the in the
That's
same.
that's Roundup. Glyphosate is Roundup.
Okay, that's the same thing.
Okay,
Okay.
and Roundup itself is not. I used it to establish a field of comfrey, which has a taproot that goes down, 10 feet, 18 feet. And but when you're trying to first put it in, the grasses will take over. And so what I did is when I put the comfrey in, I hit the field once with Roundup, and it killed the grasses enough to allow the comfrey then to establish itself. Now it's not organic for another 2 years, according to organic systems. But then within the third year, the comfrey has taken over everything because it has these big leaves that shield out the grass from being able to use photosynthesis. But at first, when you first put it in, and so it's how you use the field. That's what I want to teach children. That why you do what you do. Certain fields like that get flooded in the summers with riverfront property, grows really good mints and other things, but it has thrip, nematode, and red spider in it. Now these are considered bad, except nematode is not necessarily bad in certain root crops. And so what you're doing, you choose your environment to grow what you want to grow. The environment will tell you that usually by the weed that's growing. And the book you got, that Native Plants,
Mm-hmm.
has 50 chapters of marketable weeds. A weed is defined as a plant out of place. If you go down to a
Right.
river, you'll see there's catnip growing down there, and there's other kinds of things that grow around the catnip. That's because of the habitat. Each habitat is slightly different, and what you're doing is understanding what the soil is telling you it wants to grow. And that's what that weed book is going to do for you, because all of those weeds in there are all marketable, including ginseng and echinacea.
Yeah, I'm super excited.
Cascara.
And I'm super excited about that because yeah, so the book that Rick is referring to is the Nomadic Life of the Professional Forager, and it's the Native Plants of Commercial Importance that I just
Right.
ordered from Rick again to add to
And
my
that
library.
book will teach you how to supplement your rural incomes when the grid goes down and you're growing your own food and you have a bunch of weeds that you don't know what to do with. Well, those weeds can be used, some of them, markets that other states can't grow and need.
Yeah, that sounds amazing because as we
Well, that's
know,
just a way to supplement your income. That's what it's about. I
yeah,
was
and
survival. Yeah.
well, and you've survived through thick and thin, it sounds like, right?
Well, stay tuned on that.
Stay tuned. Yeah. So
My
okay.
teeth right now, I got two teeth that touch
Yeah.
customer gone up here, down there, and so I can't do Monty Python. Come back, I can still bite.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah. So within that so within the mind control, just to go a little bit more into that. So how familiar with you are you about like maybe hypnotic, like mind control through hypnosis, maybe through like the telecommunication systems or the CIA like Mockingbird and being able to control audio sources and what's your take on that type of
Well,
stuff?
in hypnosis, uh, what you have to do is give permission for someone to take you somewhere that you may not want to go, and they can fool you by lying. Oh, we're going to do this, but actually, nobody can make you do something you don't want to do. If you
That's
know
like a
who you are, you can
divine.
be fooled. Oh yeah, I want to get fatter. Have you noticed how the the meme now for everybody is heavyweight is good?
Yeah,
Why is
yeah, for
that?
sure. Yeah, that's just one thread in the whole echelon
Yeah,
of
that's your form of group hypnosis where people aren't aware that their values are being skewed or suggested that aren't necessarily for their best interest. And people
yeah.
follow along because that's in fad.
Yeah.
Or
What's your take on more of like the like insidious, like the whole like satanic family like dynamic like mind
well,
control?
okay, so that's the distinction between preferences and absolutes. That's another talk I did. Christianity is in works in absolutes, where more Eastern schools have the yin within the yang. And the example I might do is, Daddy, I hate this, and Daddy, I love that. And I would look at my daughter and say, I'll bet I could find something you hate even more.
Hmm.
And then she'd get the idea of you prefer this over that. And that's where the yin or over in was in the yang, as opposed it's either black or it's white, and the 200 shades of gray.
Hmm.
Well,
Yeah, and I think like
that's a
by
metaphor.
degrees is an important understanding is that there are things there's a percentage to
Words
everything,
and so
right?
on.
It's not
And,
just this or that.
and
So
Seraphim and Nephilim and the fallen angels and the so-called concept of Christ and the devil, um, those are Christian concepts that did not exist in pre-Christian society and have only been around less than 2,000 years out of the
yeah.
12,000 that, you
So
know.
have you heard about different aspects of like family bloodlines and all these different types of like the Committee
Yeah,
of
that's
300
where
and
the Catholic Church, when Pope Innocent the First declared war on the Cathars in the year 1000,
South of France.
that the Catholic Church and the teachings of Christ went in opposite directions. And,
Oh.
well, Christ was bloodline. Cathars of Europe. That was his bloodline. And to
Because that
declare
was
war,
Mary Magdalene going off at the end of that, right, to the south of France, and there's all this.
and Christ had 2 children.
Hmm.
That
Have you
people
ever
don't talk about.
come across Ralph Ellis's work before?
Who?
Ralph Ellis.
I'm not sure.
No, he's an interesting guy, just that I've come across as well. But it's okay for another show. So,
Well, I did studies when I came. My parents were atheists, and they sent me to school to become a Missouri Synod Lutheran because of the high school missionary crap that was going on in our high schools. And when I came out of graduate school, I knew there was something else going on. So what I did, like where I'm not just a dabbler, I go into something. I studied 6 years with Gershom Scholem, learned Old Hebrew and Greek, and did my own translation. Now here's one for you. Dead Sea Scrolls out of Qumran. There are 2 Dead Sea Scrolls. One's 80 years old after the fact, and the other's 120. Both suggest you don't put the king of Jerusalem on a cross. They put his brother Simon on it, and for political reasons. The older one, the 120-year-old one, suggested they also gave Simon something to drink to get off the cross before he was dead. Now, did that happen? I don't know. But there's some inconsistencies, in terms of what we're being told, and the fact that Muhammad, Buddha, I have met 5th plane mystics. These are people that supposedly come back from mankind. I would be classified now as a 4th plane mystic. I'll never be like Sharon Singh or a 5th plane mystic, but I've met them, and there's something about these kinds of people that show a development of wisdom that is for man, not just them. And I follow one of those. I went ahead and I meditate now. I went to India. I met Sharon Singh. I became part of the Santmat, S-A-N-T-M-A-T, 2 words, which is Path of the Masters, where I meditate each day for 2 hours. And that was to train my mind, because the studies I've done in magic with a K have to do with using your mind as a tool, not an absolute. And in other words, there's something more going on than just your belief systems, which are arbitrary. I mean, how many times have you changed your belief in terms of what you think is actually happening? And some of it's arbitrary, and some of it you don't know, so you're kind of this, and sometimes you're that, predicated on what your purpose is about, why you're trying to do something. And that is where you use your mind as a tool, just like magic with a C, sleight of hand. As a metaphor.
Absolutely. Yeah, so as far as like the movie like Eyes Wide Shut, right? Like ceremonial magic where there's these different things, something's being said, but there's something below the surface that everyone's in on that seems that someone's not, Tom Cruise or whatever, right?
That the power is okay, here's one. The power is in the secret, and the secret is the power.
Right. So
the power is in the secret, and the secret is the power. That's why magic lodges always, like Golden Dawn, had secrets. But you'll notice Golden Dawn had an incredible amount of intellectuals part of it. Why is that? Because it holds more insight on how to become you.
Right. So are these orders like the Golden Dawn and OTO and everything? Are they benevolent? Are they trying to do something in man's spirit and heart, or is there this like more?
The right answer is yes.
That's the point of all these systems, right?
Okay, that's why Castaneda talked about fear, the first enemy of man. The second enemy was personal power. The third enemy was when you started seeing things clearly. That became an enemy. And then the
Right.
fourth enemy is what I enjoy, old age.
Right, right. I love those. But as far as so you've done ceremonial magic, like lots of
Yeah,
I've seen you with like swords and all that stuff, drawing circles and the
I've
whole
got
thing.
great pictures. That's where I started.
That was
That's
the
not where
beginning.
I am. That's where you start.
Right.
That was my start point. And I made discoveries which are unique for me and doesn't mean they're true for you. That's the part of what made us God's favorite choice.
Hmm.
And yet, all our wars were judging others. Jews versus the Christians versus the Muslim versus the Christians versus Christians. I mean, it's just
Hmm.
nuts. Who's
Yeah.
right? The only
Well,
person
and
you could judge, according to Jesus, is yourself.
right. Right.
So
And
how
so
come you're judging someone else and looking down on them, saying they're wrong? They're not
right.
necessarily wrong for them. For you, maybe,
Right.
but not for them.
But when you've been around these different like government officials and these different people and these companies and there's this amazing science and technology, but there's also this like occult kind of esoteric beliefs hanging out in there at the background. Like, did you have an advantage to sort of put those together with certain
Why?
people and
What I
understand if there
chose
was more
was
of a,
correct for me, not what they wanted me to do. That's
right,
why,
right.
yeah, I did what I felt was right, and then discovered when I made mistakes, tried not to make the same one twice. And that's where I've had a very rich life, is that I now know what I don't want to do.
Right, and so that's a huge part of it. Okay, so when it comes to you speaking and coming on radio and writing books and actually, having these high level military clearances, but, talking
Well,
about
I
this
did,
stuff
don't. Yeah.
before, I know you don't anymore, but actually talking about it before, you're on your deathbed, so to speak. Like why did you come out and start like making this big transformation to speak about your
Mostly to
experiences?
try to market my books because I didn't want to go with a publisher. I'm self-publishing. And how do I get known?
It's
Trying
just the
to,
way to do it.
support myself by my writings rather than going into marketing and marketing herbs or some of the other things that would probably be a lot safer for me and no one would care. Go ahead, make all the money you want. I don't care. But that isn't what I wanted to do. I wanted to write. So I have my own purpose is to complete now is to complete 147 manuscripts and leave footprints for our children, whom I personally think are the ones that are going to save this earth, not you or me. And
Absolutely.
why would we want to send them to school to become us?
Yeah, there's
I mean,
something.
really, what they do is they dumb you down. They take a child that's brilliant and make them into. I mean, I watched how they did it to me.
Yeah. Yeah, and I
And
think a lot of intelligent people can share the same sentiment around
it's a sense of uniqueness. There are, in my humble opinion, as many different religions as there are human beings. And the reason you go to church is to find a group of people that have values that you aspire toward. You find a group of people that are doing things that you want to be more like that. You hang out with them. That's what
hmm
church is about, in my humble opinion, fellowship. And
Yeah.
I go to different churches looking for different values.
Yeah, absolutely.
I
And
don't know. I mean, I know that I'm um, just another human being trying to find my way through the maze.
yeah, absolutely.
This
And
is a
and
dream. It's
it's
not
it's
even real.
interesting how those experiences and again being with such a high advances of technology and being and having these clearances, you end up still just feeling like part of the human story and part of the human condition and
Yeah, just like
you're
everything, just a slightly
yeah.
different. And well, what in the hell is that? Dang, what is that? The dark humor. That's what's gotten me through the whole thing is humor. It isn't about Black Lives Mattering. That was to polarize us. I grew up with Jimi Hendrix. And Arthur Ashe was he's a better tennis player than I was. So,
Yeah.
I'm not prejudiced at all. I grew up
Hmm.
in Seattle. We had the Central District. That's where all the blacks live. But you know, Seattle has got its own ghettos. Let me tell you, and it's not about being black or white. It's living color. That's what it's about.
Absolutely. Well, we're winding down for this episode. Let's see if there's other things here that we can touch on before we go. Um,
By the way, thank
so
you for having me. It's a pleasure. I like your energy and I like your sense.
hey, thanks, Rick.
Yeah.
I appreciate that, man. I'm a big fan of yours, and it's nice to come full circle and be able to talk to the man.
Oh, I'm not,
Um,
man. I'm just old and smell bad. That kind of thing. Now I know what I don't want to do.
yeah. So
Yeah.
within that, it says here that you are a Swiss Mason. What is
Uh,
that?
my great grandfather was part of Waldorf out of Zurich. I'm part of the Nelson line out of England. Lord Nelson was my great great grandfather, and I'm just part of the. I'm English, and they
Hmm.
had Blue Lodges, not Masonry per se, Blue Lodge, which is different.
Okay.
I didn't join American Masonry. I thought about it and then decided not to.
And what was the decision around that? Like as far as like the OTO versus Golden Dawn or Masonry, aren't the OTO and the Golden Dawn sort of some
They're
version of
magical
Masonry
orders.
almost?
They're oriented toward magic and the older Bibles like the Sefer Yetzirah, Book of Formation, things of that nature. We use gematria. You call it numerology, but you're
Hmm.
using tools that have historical significance in terms of trying to discover who you are. That's what magic is really about. And the Order of the Silver Star, or J.M. Argentum, I am one of the few that can initiate into that. And what I'm going to do is put some rare manuscripts up called In the Continuum, which I wrote with Phyllis Seckler, Mildred Burlingame, Aleister Crowley. I have been given publication in Class B. I'm the only one in history, other than Crowley, that has that level of acceptance for writing. And that's what I am, a writer. Trying
Wow.
to, that's what I do is write. I've
What's
got a
the
lot more things to write about if I can be allowed to do that.
so I'm here in the Okanagan and there's the ski hill right by me is the Silver Star ski hill. And what is the significance of the Silver Star?
Order of the Silver Star was called. It was. It's an inner lodge for personal development. Why you chose to join OTO, which is an outer lodge. Outer lodge does things with groups of people. Inner lodge is personal. And
Hmm.
what you're doing for self development, which is uniquely different than what you would do.
Hmm. And but as far as the star symbolism and the 5 points, like I know that can be the elements and the spirit
Well,
being
you're talking the order of the Silver Star is not the five-pointed star. It's
okay.
Argeum Argentum, or Order of the Silver Star. And its publication came out during Grady McMurtry when he was caliphate, called In the Continuum. And I've got all of the original ones that Phyllis Seckler published and was part of writing that when she would put in rare things from Crowley or some of the other older members of the, like Friedrich Koch, whatever. I ended up
Hmm.
getting his library. I kept that library intact for children. It's just
Wow.
one of the libraries I have. My
Well,
libraries are incredible. I mean,
yeah.
really, no, I have really incredible library.
You said you
I
have
just,
two storage lockers of just full of books, basically, right?
yeah, physics and agriculture. I did the writings. I was the one that introduced Fukuoka and Bill Mollison and permaculture into society. I did that when I was writing for Acres USA. And so I have stuff, that goes way back that historically are as important as foundations works, which I think will be good for children like it was for me.
Wow. Well, Rick, it's been a pleasure to be with you, Dr. Richard Allen Miller. I really appreciate you being on the show for another episode, and I want to do another episode and just keep it going. And I'll
Sure.
try to like pull some sort of details and
Well, you're
specific
doing
things
fine.
as we keep
You're
going.
getting everybody can get a full glimpse of what I am not.
Yeah, and what you are, which is a lot, good
Well,
sir. But yeah, well,
I,
thank you.
I'm
So
human. I'm not a big deal. I'm just slightly different, giving mankind a little broader edge. That's all it's about, really.
yeah, just
Really.
doing our small piece and humble
And
contribution
we're
to
all unique.
humanity, and
That's the part that most people miss. We're not similar. We're
we're all
all
very different.
uniquely different. Yeah. That's
Yeah.
because of our personal choices.
Yeah. Well, and
Yeah.
maybe we can get into the holographic universe in a future episode and how you look and discern and into the multiverse and so on.
Yeah.
Because I find that stuff really interesting, and that's an episode
It's
in itself. Well,
of course, that I don't think there will ever be a theory of everything. I don't think we're getting closer to the truth because in the the holographic universe book, chapter 8 is the mind's eye where imagination is reality. Anything you can imagine is possibly true is not only true, it's even more than that. And that's what
oh,
made children our single most important natural resource because that's where
yeah.
they come from the womb like that.
Amen. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in to the Only Mystics Journey. Once again, I'm your host, Old Man Junkins, Dan Jenkins, the whole deal. Rick, it's a pleasure to be with you, and I hope you guys will tune in again next time. Have a wonderful night.